Shumbres, and this is the Gaining Perspective podcast, where we bring you insightful conversations with some of the top thought leaders in the investment advisor profession and investment management industry. I am the founder of Advisor Perspectives and a vice chairman of Vetify. According to a recent J.D. Power study, fewer than 15% of clients said their advisor provides an ideal advice experience. Yet many advisors likely suffer from Dunning Kruger cognitive bias, where they think they are among that 15% when for the majority that's impossible. Why is financial advice in such a state? Because despite their best efforts, financial advisors aren't hitting the core attributes of comprehensive advice. To solve this, Practice Intel, a new firm led by Dr. Preston Cherry, Tom Rieman, Larry Shumbres, and Nick Gudz, among others, has launched. Combining practice level insights with innovative e-learning resources and a proprietary index that benchmarks a firm's valuation against its peers, Practice Intel helps advisors enhance their advice experience while achieving more organic growth and ultimately increasing their valuation. So my guests today are Tom Rieman. He is the founding partner and chief executive officer of Practice Intel, and Dr. Preston Cherry. He is also a co-founder and chief evangelist of Practice Intel. So I'm going to start by having each of you tell me about your career paths and how the two of you met and how you came up with the idea for Practice Intel.
This is Tom, and my career path, advisor early on. But basically my career path has been mostly around process and performance improvement. In large firms like JP Morgan, in smaller firms like Brinker Capital, where I not only spend time around practice management, but also as a wholesaler. And then my career path took me to J.D. Power, where I led the Wealth Solutions practice. And it really was that final capping piece, that last body of knowledge that enabled me and us to define and bring Practice Intel to the market. And that really is very much how we were born, out of deep institutional consumer data, grounded in a very deep understanding of exactly what's happening in the advice profession.
Preston.
Yeah, sure, Bob. Thank you. And yeah, I arrived to the profession just by happenstance. My mentor. I'm an advisor. I'm a professor. I'm now part of a wealth tech and also speaker. So just all around, my thing, Bob, is about advancing the human condition through financial advice. So connecting life and money and helping people with their journey. So whether it be through academia, financial advisory, wealth tech platform, however we get to it, I want to help people advance their human condition through financial advice.
Thank you. And Preston, you are a speaker at Vetify's Exchange Conference in February of 2023, earlier this year. So it launched very recently. Tell me, what was the impetus to create the platform, and how does the platform work?
Yeah, so really the impetus is recognizing that there is a gap between the ideal and what most advisors delivered. Bob, you mentioned the data at the beginning, that when you ask clients about the advice experience, and we do define that very specifically, that less than 15%, yes, my advisor's delivering on that in its fullest extent. And that was the impetus. So the platform allows and provides advisors to actually know with certainty what their clients think about the advice experience. So that 80% that suffer, or the people that suffer from the Dunning Kruger effect, or another way to put that is, if you ask people how many are above average, most will say yes. And of course, that's not possible. That's what this platform is all about, providing that irrefutable moment of truth, and then a path to actually improving on the very core strategic drivers that matter most to clients.
So, Preston, tell me how the platform works.
We struggle with, when I talk about our industry, we struggle with organic growth. It's either low or doesn't exist. So the stated advice is either bad or underwhelming. So what tools do we have in our industry to help us grow? And financially, when we talk to the Dunning Kruger effect, are advisors really delivering good advice? And what are clients receiving far as good advice? So what is their advice experience and how do we bridge the gap? So this is what the platform does. Helps bridge the gap, helps growth by doing two things: growing the client experience through better advice, financial advice, and the client advisor relationship. So if they're doing these two things, Bob, which is growing in these two areas, then the firm grows. And that's where we're talking about organic growth. And if this organic growth is happening, then we have better firm valuation as well. So I don't know a financial advisor in the world that doesn't like to grow with having their dollars being added to their pocket, right? So, but I think at the end of the day, I think advisors want to help their clients grow with their life and money first, and then their firms grow as a result of that. And this is what this dashboard does.
And I've seen that data that says that over some fairly long period of time, there's been very little organic growth in the advisory profession. That if you define organic growth really as new clients bringing in their assets, and you exclude growth from market appreciation and you exclude growth from M&A, you also use the phrase advice experience instead of client experience or advisor experience. Explain the difference in that terminology and why should advisors be focusing on their advice experience?
Bob, that's a good question. It's actually a very important differentiation between the two. But just quickly, you made the comment about organic growth, and flat to no is what most people will say. Actually, there is a tremendous amount of organic growth in our industry. It is just concentrated in the top decile of advisors. You look at the latest McKinsey study from earlier in the year, and they found the top decile advisor averages 28 new households a year. Tremendous number. The next quartile 7, the bottom quartile 1. So there's a huge concentration, and really fundamentally, what we're trying to do is help more advisors deliver an experience like that top decile and realize that growth. And that is by focusing on the advice experience. So, Bob, if you think about our industry, we talk about the client experience all the time and the importance of the client experience, and it is critical. Client experience, I like to analogize, it's like walking to a restaurant and being greeted, friendly greeting, responsive folks, nice environment, lovely setting, all of that. That's the client experience. And in our business, of course, that means responsiveness, a seamless tech stack, whether it means a latte when you walk in the office or tickets to the ball game or whatever it might be. That's the client experience and important. But when you think about the advice experience, it's analogous to a restaurant and the food that is served. So you can have a phenomenal space, very responsive, nice people, but if that meal that lands on the table doesn't match that and is subpar, it doesn't matter what the client experience is like. That all diffuses very quickly. So when we think about the advice experience, and this came directly out of the research that I led at JD Power, which has been published very extensively, the advice experience is 7 core attributes that basically make or break the advice experience. Is the advice comprehensive? Does the advisor understand me? Do they know my risk tolerance? Do they have my best interest in mind? Do I know the fees I'm paying? Is it an effective financial plan? Is there some kind of level of connectivity to life? Meaning, are they part of that client's life? Those 7 things are what make advice advice. When advisors deliver on that in its fullest, great things happen. But as we saw by the research, not very many advisors are doing that. I'll add one more thing, Bob. And I just had this conversation on Monday or Friday with a firm. And if we ask an advisor, hey, do you deliver on these 7 things? Well, of course, the majority of advisors are going to say, yes, of course I do. And our response is, well, you probably do, but how do you know with certainty? And that's what our platform does.
There are advisors who will listen to this and say they think they know how their clients feel about them. They think they know how they deliver on those 7 core attributes that you just mentioned. How would you challenge that and encourage them to use your service?
Well, I would say that some of them think they know, but do they know and do they want to know? I just got back from a conference. I think it was Tiburon, I think it was. And, Donald Rumsfeld was famous for talking things on the microphone at press conferences for saying a whole bunch of nothing. And he said, there are known knowns, known unknowns, and unknown unknowns. And they were like, Don, what did you say? And so this is just like the questions about knowing for certain, like Tom said. It's, do you want to know? You want to know the knowns and know for certain. You don't want to know the unknowns, because if you don't know the unknowns, and what does that mean, right? I don't want to be done, right? I want to know from my clients for certain, because if you're not growing, if you don't know, then your clients have somewhere to go, because loyalty is different from advocating, Bob. If they're loyal to you or satisfied, they're satisfied and loyal to what? You don't know for certain. So you going back to the attributes that Tom was talking about, you have to ask for the advice experience. What type of advice are you receiving? And what are you advocating for? And then that way we know for certain that you have this stick to itiveness about what you're receiving. I asked my grandfather one time, I gave him a card, Bob, and and I wrote some kind words in there, but there was no money in it. He said, "Son, well, I need you to give me a card that I can feel." So he wanted something that he could feel along with some money. So that's what financial advice is. It's something that you could, like Tom said, it was about something that you understand. I want to be understood, but I also want comprehensive advice that's effective and all the other attributes as well. So you have to know for certain what you're receiving, what you define as financial advice, what you're receiving, and what clients value most, so you can grow and know for certain.
Mhm. And Bob, kind of to add on to that, interestingly enough, one key tell is organic growth. So if they say I'm doing that, and then the response is, well, that's great. So that should be proved out by higher levels of organic growth. Are they referring people to you? Going back to this conversation, we've only launched 5 weeks, and we're having an extraordinary amount of enterprise conversations already. And one of the founders of an RIA that's rolling up, they built out a really large one previously. He said, "Yeah, the advisor might say I'm doing that," and his response was, "Well, that's great. Where are all the referrals? If you don't." And I'll even say Ron Carson said it, and Preston and I just got back from Tiburon. It's part of our circuit. And Ron Carson said back in May that organic growth is the truth. That organic growth is a direct reflection of how compelling your value proposition is. And as we said before, organic growth for the vast majority of advisors is flat. So what does that say?
I was looking at your site last night and I saw something called the Relationship Quality Index. What is that? And is that a way that advisors can use your service to increase their valuation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so Bob, our industry is familiar with Net Promoter Score a lot, so NPS, and we kind of add some juice. We add some voltage to NPS. So we use RQI, which is Relationship Quality Index, which is NPS plus uh, uh, value for fees, overall experience, loyalty, and trust. So if we add all that together, then we get RQI. So it goes beyond just satisfaction and loyalty, because we believe that, and it's not just a belief system. I mean, satisfaction and loyalty is somewhat, it is flawed. And when we're talking about retention, you see all the statistics in our industry about retention. Retention is high, but yeah, again, they're based in satisfaction and loyalty. Again, loyalty to what and satisfaction to what. All right. So when you start talking about these advice experiences, like we said, and all the attributes, then when you start talking about value, overall experience, loyalty, trust, along with NPS, now we're getting some stickiness into what clients value most, which you have embedded client experience and also advice experience along with loyalty, satisfaction, and all that. And it ties right back into the advice attributes that we're talking about. So when you're talking about the RQI, you can see a trend line about that's what you see in the dashboard. If your RQI is getting better, then it syncs to all of the better relationship quality, the advice quality, and then your practice valuation as well.
And Bob, to add on that, and Preston, thank you so much. That was wonderful. So think about advocacy. We all believe in NPS just on our team. We love NPS. But what we're able to show and measure is the quality and value of the experience that's being advocated for at a very detailed level. And this RQI score is not only useful just for the advisor to know, but as we talk to firms who are in the M&A space, they're excited about using RQI to actually get a view into an advisor's practice before they even buy it. Where is the relationship quality index? How much embedded growth is there when you're delivering a really great advisory experience and the majority of your folks feel that? Or where is there embedded risk, both attrition and regulatory risk? So it has a lot of powerful applications.
And just to be clear, NPS is, and tell me if I've got this right, it's basically a measure of how likely your customers are to recommend you to their friends, right?
That's correct. In fact, that is the question. The NPS question is how likely you refer from none at all to very much so. So that's correct, yes.
Going back to the 7 core attributes that you mentioned earlier, that your research shows define this ideal advice experience, which of those do you see that advisors are most deficient in, and why?
Yeah, so actually you can look on our website, pracintel.com, and it's on the advisor page, and you'll actually see the JD Power study results that are published there. Again, all the work that was done during my time there we published extensively, so it's all out in the public domain. But there are two that are primary, and there's a third that's really problematic. So the two where it's most efficient is comprehensive advice, and I think that right about half of clients say their advisor doesn't deliver comprehensive advice. Now, the argument is usually, well, the client doesn't know what comprehensive means, and so the definition we always brought forward was it's comprehensive in the eyes of the client, and depending on where the client is in their life, that definition can change, but that's the important perspective. The other, actually, now that I think about it, there's 2 others. The other one is understanding the fees they pay. Only about 40% of clients say with certainty that they understand the fees that they pay. And that's, how can you attribute value to something if you don't even know what you're paying for? The third one, which I just popped in my mind, is effective financial plans. About 30% saying their financial plan is actually effective. All right, so there's 3 that are really deficient. But there's one more that tends to raise eyebrows when you hear this. But in the latest study from earlier this year when I was still at JD Power, let's get this right, 38% of clients couldn't say with certainty that their advisor had their best interest in mind. Now let's pause there for a second. Think about how incredibly impactful that is in terms of regulatory risk, and just as a testament to where our industry stands. And you asked at the beginning, Bob, like, why are we here? What was the impetus for growing and creating this platform? Those very statistics are that very impetus, because we need to improve what we'll call the state of advice. What we do as an industry is far too powerful. The end result, far too important to be falling this short of delivering on the ideal.
Interesting. When I am at cocktail parties and I'm asked what I do, and I explain my background and as a publisher of newsletters for financial advisors, the conversation typically evolves to what the person I'm speaking with uses as a financial advisor. And I always ask them 2 questions. I say, do you know what your fees are? And is the advisor you're using a fiduciary? And the data that I've collected in this anecdotal, informal way suggests that very few people can answer both those questions. Let's talk about advisors who have a steady clientele, are seeing growth. Do you find that they are excelling at these core attributes, or could they be at risk for attrition?
So actually, Preston has noted this a couple of times, and I'm going to add one more little bullet point on here. He talks about satisfaction, and basically satisfaction is a function of expectation. So when we see clientele that are there, they're not attriting. Michael Kitces talks about the high rate of retention. The reality is there is risk in retention. Now that may sound like an oxymoron, but in the reality is there's risk in retention because satisfaction is a function of expectations. When expectations change, satisfaction can plummet dramatically and very quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that. When you talk about retention, again, retention to what? And Bob, you said advocacy, and when you ask these questions about understanding fees, and when we talk about understanding or receiving a comprehensive advice, all of these things. When you go to when you go to the store, or the mall, or the country club, golf club, wherever you see people, wherever you socialize, and when somebody says, you know, my advisor did this or my advisor did that, right? And then somebody says, well, my advisor doesn't do that. Ah, see, there's the attrition right there. So there would they someone has somewhere to go right at that point. So you don't have advocacy, you just have loyalty and satisfaction to something that they don't know that exists. So therein lies that person that asked the question or was saying that my advisor does this and does that. They were talking that this and that. That's an attribute, you see, because they know specifically what they're advocating for. And then it doesn't necessarily there's no attrition at that other firm or whatever, but at least there's less. So at least you can mitigate it. Therein lies the difference. So you don't want your other folks saying out there, saying, "Oh, my advisor doesn't do that," and therein lies the growth aspect.
Hey, Bob, do you like food?
I love food.
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, listen, food's an amazing thing. So imagine you have someone that says a chain Italian restaurant. I won't pick on anyone in particular. And they're like, this is great. I love it. And maybe they're a 22-year-old college student, or maybe they're someone just hasn't had broad experiences. And then all of a sudden you take them to the north end of Boston. What happens?
They realize that what they thought was good wasn't so great.
And that's it. They have that aha moment. And those aha moments, based on the data and based on our or even our own experiential perspective, that's what's baked into our industry right
now. The false sense of superiority.
And we want to teach people how to do this too, Bob. And that's a benefit of the portal on the dashboard, is to come to a place to do better.
So one of the other things I saw on your platform is that you have some educational modules. How did you go about developing those? Tell me about them. What makes them different from what I can already find in the advisory profession?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one thing we haven't noted yet is the background of our team. Preston obviously has a PhD, or I shouldn't say obviously. Preston has a PhD in financial planning. Our other co-founder, Kath Contrell, has a PhD in industrial psychology. And my academic background is in organizational science. So what we bring is focus on the advice process versus the sales process. And that fundamentally is dramatically different than the vast majority, if not all, of the curriculum and learning content in our industry. We pulled much of it in from organizational sciences and the practice of process consulting. If anybody wants to go look into it, it's a 50-year discipline, both academically and practically vetted. And so we believe that we focus just on the core attributes. There's 120 different things that an advisor or practice management program could focus on. We are just focused on those 7 things that we've identified that matter most. So not only do we bring in content that is unique, and I'm so careful about that word. I don't use kind of unique, sort of unique, because there's no such thing. It is unique to our industry. And we're focused on creating some level of production quality. Bob, I don't know if you actually click through any of it, but we try to make this where there's actually some level of production quality, voiceover videos, text narratives, a lot of different components. But by the end of the year, we will have over 3.5 hours of content focused on the advice process on the portal.
And I would say, Bob, if I can add just a few things too. Tom loves to highlight our PhDs, and he leaves out sometimes that we both were wholesalers too. And so advisors, they have to, quote unquote, I put air quotes, I know people can't see it, but we'd have to sell something too. But I mean, what do I mean by sell? I mean that if we educate ourselves and fill ourselves with information that we can and services that we can offer. I often share with folks that if we have a service that's in the best interest of our clients, we do not have to make hard sells. We make offers to our folks that align with what they value. And so that there's a big difference. And that in line aligns with advisors on how to grow their practices. And so we do have something that they can offer to their clients. And also too, I would say that I'm an advisor. I'm an advisor as well. I have a practice and I've been practicing for 20 years. So although I have almost 20 years, so about 18. But I would say that just because I'm an academic, somebody told me I'm an academic. I didn't come up with that word. But some folks say, well, you got a lot of academia up in there, those PhDs and all this other stuff. If those that can't teach can't do, no, well, listen, we have a blend of both on our team. So we bring a lot to the table as a team.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I love that pracademic because we absolutely have deep academic roots and theoretical grounding in all the work we do, and we think that's important because if you want to scale something, it needs to be rooted in something beyond. Hey, I think I have a good idea. But with that said, our content. One, I love your phrase around selling because when you think about what a typical advisor sells, fundamentally they're selling some sort of product or some sort of solution, packaged. When an advisor acts as a true advisor, that top decile, those best advisors, what they're doing is they're selling the process of advice. They're helping their clients make good decisions. And they're not only helping them, they're actually through a co-creative, collaborative process, enabling their clients to make good decisions, which is a far cry from just selling them and saying, here's a couple of choices or options to choose from. So our curriculum not only makes the case for change, but also provides very granular, specific process, language, methodology so people can execute on this well. I think I said this at a conference earlier in the year, as a salesperson in our industry, to do that really, really well, you got to be artful. You have to execute at the highest level. To execute, to deliver advice, you just have to use the process. You don't have to be artful. I mean, it's good. Artful is good. Don't get me wrong. But just using an advice process versus a sales process it's in a completely different game. It's a moped versus a G6, Gulfstream 6 jet.
Walk me through the process that a client will go through when they sign up with you. What are the things that you will ask of that client when I say client, I mean an advisor who signs up with you. What is the data that you're going to be collecting from that advisor and their clients? And then, since you're an advocate for fee transparency, what does it cost? What is your service cost?
So one, it's a fairly simple process. I'll start with the fee. It's $195 a month, or $19.95 a year. And for that, you're getting practice insights, which is the research component. You're getting practice development, which is the enhancement. So the first part is knowing with certainty what your advisors or your clients think about the advice experience. The second part is helping you get better at the advice experience. The third part is practice valuation, where you then can take the relationship quality index, right? The quality and value of your client relationships, which directly impacts your practice valuation, and utilize our valuation equation, embedding RQI in that. And then there's actually a practice AI, which is still fledgling, more to come out of that. Maybe we can talk about that in 6 to 9 months. So they come on, they sign up, they provide us very simply with a name, an email, and a phone number, create a password. They choose whether they want to pay by month, which is no contract, cancel anytime, or annually. When they first sign in, there'll be a quick little survey for them to fill out in terms of their tenure, AUM, number of clients. They can opt out of every single question. They don't have to provide the answers, but we're asking them that. And then once they're in the portal, we are integrated already with Redtail and Wealthbox. The only client information we pull over is name, first name, last, and email. And they pull all that, upload their client base onto the portal, and then they can customize the email that's sent out. We have both currently a manual process for that, but we are literally as we speak, and it'll be done in the next couple of weeks, creating an automated system where the emails will just go out, 1/12 of the book every month. So pretty simple. Now there's some interesting conversations we're already having with our CRM partners about helping take the data that we're collecting. Because one thing I'll note, we're asking questions that in many ways can cause a compliance issue if the advisor knows exactly what each client said in the response. So we bring the data back in aggregate for the advisor, so they get them back in little packets and they can't attach any particular client to any particular survey response. But we still retain all the data. So we are working with our CRM partners to bring the data back to the CRM, basically to create personas where I might say, I'm meeting with Bob. I can't know with certainty what Bob said, but I can find out what everybody like Bob said on the survey and said around the advice experience. So I can start to dial that in. So anyway, that's maybe a longer answer than you're looking for, but some really exciting stuff.
That's a great answer. So, as a newly launched firm, how do you define success for your platform?
Yeah, success. So here, we're serving a couple of markets, but the same market. And I would say RIAs, individual RIAs that want to, sign up because we're doing webinars through, the CRM webinar market. We're going to conferences, seeing folks, and we just got back from Tiburon. I mean, and seeing high level executives that want to enterprise. I mean, we're having several conversations and how to reach the market. So success looks like for us to where we are aligning with companies at the enterprise level that want to uh, dole us out on a high macro level. And also, too, we're talking to companies that say, we want to integrate you with our philosophy, the way we grow our advisors, like a KPI metric. It's saying, we have a thought that we would like to help our advisors grow, but we don't want to build it. We'd like to use Prac Intel to say this is how we'd like to motivate and train and measure our advisors and see how they're doing with their clients. And then lastly, like we mentioned, the retail. So individual RIAs that say, I really like this solution. I like wanting to come to your place to be able to research my client, to educate, and also value my practice. So success looks like for us is to is to have an enterprise partner very very soon, and to start signing people up. And I would say we're very close actually to two partners, probably by the end of the year. No question, first quarter, and starting to see some trickle ins on the RIA front.
Yeah, and Bob, to that point, it's adoption, of course. But as Preston indicated, whenever you bring something to market and you're always looking for product market fit. And by the way, everybody has their idea is the next thing, greatest thing since sliced bread, right? And in our mind, it's great, and in building it's great. But ultimately, the real test is when you start bringing it in front of people. And the response we've been getting are words like, "This is remarkable. I love it. There's nothing like this. How can who else do we need to bring? We want to bring more people into this conversation. Let's schedule the next meeting." So adoption is obviously key, but here's the real answer, the ultimate long-term answer. I know this may be sort of shorter term, to move the needle on the advice experience. Here's the good news. We can measure it. We do measure it. We know where we stand as a state of advice. JD Power still talks about the advisory experience continuum they're framing. They were just on a webinar within the last month talking about how the problem still persists. We want to move the needle, and we're going to be able to prove that the needle's being moved. So that's the ultimate goal.
And this is where Tom and I were partners. I mean, so we agree on this fully. Um, what's driving this ship is the advice profession. It's, I mean, obviously, we have an enterprise, and success means, we like to do good business. But when you're talking about advancing the profession through quality of advice, it is what people value most. And we kicked off the show with our backgrounds. And, my background is about the human experience, and Tom has this similar passion. If we're affecting the individuals' livelihoods by aligning their life and money and their aspirations, and they're getting great advice from advisors, And that's what Tom was talking about, moving the needle. If we can help advisors do that with their clients, I just got chills right here. I mean, people can't see, but I got chills. If our dashboard helps advisors do that, then we're helping the profession and we're helping people's lives.
So, James Lee refers to financial advice as the fourth great profession, right? The board president of the FPA. Couldn't agree more. Obviously, data shows not enough of us delivering on it. So we can drive that great profession further. Imagine this. Let's say there's 330 advisors, 330,000 advisors in the industry right now, roughly. If 10% of those, I'll say 30,000, we can affect 10% of those. If each one of those has 200 clients, that's 30,000 times 200. If I'm doing my math right, I think that's 6 million clients. Now let's extend that to their families, to their legacy, to their community. Think about the ripple effect that great advice actually has. And that's what we have the opportunity to do in truly advancing the advice profession.
Coming back to what you do for your clients, if there's one key takeaway that you'd like to leave with our audience of advisors about how they can create a better advice experience, what would that be?
Well, I would say have the willingness, have the willingness to want to create that better advice experience and have a willingness to know. Have a willingness to know. And when you have both of those, then selfishly you'd want to jump into the dashboard, but it's for you. It's kind of like the Jerry Maguire movie. It's like, help me, help you, right? It's like that if you have the willingness to know, if you have the willingness to want to help your client, then you want to get better in order to deliver a better advice experience, to align your firm with what your clients value. That's what we were just talking about. Was if you, not if your client wants to do better with their life and money. It's very much aligned. That's what they value. So if that's what they value, wouldn't don't you want to have the willingness to get better, with that client experience? So that's what it's all about, Bob.
Recognize there is a difference between selling and advising, and that we are predominantly a sales profession. So if when an advisor recognizes there is a difference and there's a place to sell, don't get me wrong, but there's a place to stop selling and start advising, and recognize that by enacting a more collaborative, co-creative advice process, that is the engine. And that's, of course, at the core of our curriculum, because that's the key driver. Not only does it drive success in those KPIs and those advice attributes, it drives better success for the client because now you're enabling them to make good financial decisions. It enhances the relationship dramatically because it's actually the mechanism, we talk about this extensively in our curriculum, to actually create deep, meaningful relationships. But at the same time, at the end of it, it's a far more engaging, interesting, and fulfilling role. If you're going out and selling something every day, no offense, but that's a grind of a life. But if you're going out and helping people make good decisions, putting your self-interest aside and putting the client's best interest first, that is an incredibly fulfilling way to spend your life. So this is a win along the entire value chain, from clients to advisors to the firms to the broad industry in general.
Congratulations on what you've achieved, and congratulations on what you're trying to achieve on behalf of the advisory profession. We'll include some resources in the notes that accompany this podcast where you'll be able to learn more about Practice Intel and Tom and Preston and what they offer. There'll be a link to the Practice Intel homepage, links to Tom's and Preston's LinkedIn pages so you can connect with them. There'll be bios for both of them. And there's also an article that will include about Practice Intel, putting your clients first. Tom and Preston, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Wow, I think we covered it. I think we know your RQI.
What's your number? No, Bob, we really appreciate it. And listen, you're an early adopter for us, which is great because we've had the good fortune to be resonating very deeply with our industry. So you're going to look back and go, we talked about them first. Congratulations.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having us on.
You're welcome. And I'd love to be able to circle back in a year or so maybe and talk about all the success that you've achieved. Thank you for listening to the Gaining Perspective podcast with Bob Hoopshire, today featuring Tom Rieman and Preston Cherry of Practice Intel. To support our podcast, please share, subscribe, or leave a review to help make our podcast more findable for your friends and colleagues. You can subscribe to Gaining Perspective on your favorite podcasting service.